Like I said, I'm Mike Howard, and I am originally from Knoxville, but I've moved around. I've moved in into Knoxville, out of Knoxville, and I think I've moved about 18 times. But just recently retired, moved to Knoxville, and I don't plan to leave this time. We're here. So what I'd like to do is take a few minutes and talk about EPRI. Now, most of you are probably not that familiar with EPRI. And so I'll give you a little bit of background on EPRI and specifically what the Knoxville office does as it relates to the overall EPRI. Now, for the last 10 years, I've been president and CEO of EPRI. Before that, I was in charge of all of the technology innovation at EPRI. Our headquarters is in Palo Alto, California. It started in 1972. And it was started by the electric utility companies that said, we really need to figure out a way to collaborate together to reduce our overall individual expenses associated with technology innovation. And so it came together, formed EPRI in 1972. It's a not-for-profit, and the sole purpose is to focus on developing not basic research like is going on at Oak Ridge, but more applied research. So understanding what the problems are in the industry to generate, deliver, and use electricity. And so through that, we have grown to where this year, probably $430 million worth of work, of which about a third of that is international, where we have work going on in over 40 countries. It may even be approaching 50 right now. We have offices throughout the world, and certainly here in Knoxville. 3 major offices, Palo Alto, California. We're right on the Stanford University campus, and that was what started in '72. We have our largest office is in Charlotte, North Carolina. I lived in Charlotte for a few years, and then the Knoxville office. And so again, the whole purpose of everything that we do globally. And if you would please go to the next slide, the first slide. I want to kind of talk about what we do from this slide. I've got just a few slides. And so we have seen over the years a significant change in how we generate electricity, how we use energy. Right now in the US, about 20% of our total energy is electricity. So electricity is a part of our overall energy profile. And EPRI's focus is to help accelerate and develop the technology to provide cleaner energy, more affordable energy, certainly more equitable energy, and then reliable, more resilient, and safe electricity for everyone. That's really at the heart of what we do. And the Knoxville office started in 1986. It's kind of interesting how it got started. EPRI at the time was looking at technology related to power electronics. And there was a gentleman by the name of Ralph Ferraro, who actually lives in West Knoxville right now, but was in Palo Alto at the time, and said, we need to really focus on the importance of what's called power electronics and expand the capability to be of tremendous value in the industry. And so TVA, Oak Ridge National Labs, and UT came together and said, we need to create this company that will focus on things related to power electronics. And UT had a center that was really world renowned in power electronics. And out of that, in 1986, came this group called PIAC. At the time, it stood for Power Electronics Application Center. And EPRI got interested in that. And EPRI helped to fund those early days. So that was in 1986. It's located off of Pillissippi and Dutchtown. That's where it started in 1986. There's a facility there that is owned by UT, and we rented a few offices there in '86 to help kind of incubate this new organization. I got involved in 1992. I went to UT undergraduate in electrical engineering, got out of school in 1980, joined Westinghouse, and I have been, for the most part, involved in the generation, delivery, and use of electricity for the last 40 years. And this organization got started with just 3 or 4 people. By 1992, it had maybe 6 or 7 people, 8 people. I got involved I had sold a company to a company in Pittsburgh. I lived in Pittsburgh, really didn't want to move back. Got tired of Pittsburgh's a lovely area, but winters are just a little too much for me, especially growing up in Knoxville. So we decided to stay in Knoxville and got involved in helping this small business kind of get its legs under them, and it grew. And finally, in 1999, we sold it to EPRI, and it became EPRI PIAC. Today, this organization has got over 200 people. It's responsible for probably $75, $80 million of EPRI's $430 million in revenue. It's growing. It has the expertise and knowledge that has been accumulated here in the Knoxville area. Its focus is mostly on transmission and distribution, the delivery of electricity. It is world-class. It does work all over the world and is a very, very important contributor to the overall global part of what EPRI does. And you can see on this slide all of the things that EPRI is involved in. And as we look to the future, clearly electricity as the part of the overall energy pie, I said today it's 20%. There are some people who think electricity is going to make up close to 50% of our overall energy pie by 2050. And so when you look at that increased use of electricity and the value of electricity as the most important form of energy, you can really see why the Knoxville office and what it does is so critically important. So now let's go to the next slide. By the way, I love questions. I was told that it's difficult to ask questions while I'm presenting, but we'll wrap this up here in just a few minutes, and then, again, ask your questions, whatever they are. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the significant transition that is occurring globally in not only just the energy field, but the electricity industry as well. We're seeing significant changes, less coal, more renewables, natural gas, and nuclear is playing a very important role in many, many countries, and is not going away. In the US, it represents right now about 20% of our total electricity generation. I just looked this morning, so it's about 19% right now, but renewables is a growing piece, and renewable energy represents 21% of our total electricity generation. Coal, which did make up the majority, is now down to 19% and will continue to decrease over the next coming years. Natural gas has certainly replaced coal and will continue to do so. So what we're seeing is this generation transition that is occurring not only just in the US, but globally. The other transition that's occurring in the electricity industry is how electricity flows through the system. And what I mean by that is when electricity was first started being used over 100 years ago, about 130 years ago now, it was a one-way flow of electricity from generation at our central power stations all the way through to the plug. But because of renewable energy, distributed energy resources, and so on, it's becoming a two-way flow. Homes now are generating electricity, companies are, and the complexity of this two-way flow creates tremendous challenges, but it's something that we're able to make work. And as we continue to evolve solar and wind and other energy storage devices, then this two-way flow of electricity is going to be even more important. The other transition that's occurring is toward carbon reduction. Now, whether you believe in climate change or not, it is a fact that countries are focused on reducing their carbon. Companies are focused on reducing their carbon, not just in the US, but globally. And on the left-hand side, you see right now the significant increase in CO2 emissions. And you can see there represented by the various countries. There are some developing countries that have increased significantly their CO2 emissions. Some countries are able to take steps right now to reduce their CO2 emissions. But for the most part, at least since the Paris Agreement, and even really before that, there's a tremendous focus on carbon reduction. I'm on the board of the World Energy Council, and so I get to see that from a very broad perspective. Something like 200 countries are involved in the World Energy Council. We just had a call yesterday, and just the focus and dedication is occurring to reduce carbon. But boy, is that a huge, huge challenge. So today we have 3,200 gigawatts, not gigawatts, gigatons of carbon in our thin atmosphere. Now go to the next slide. If we just continue business as usual, we're going to more than double that by 2070. Some people say that business as usual, we will double it by 2050, just 30 years from now. Now go to the next slide. Here's the challenge. To ensure that we keep the average global temperature under 2 degrees C, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, we can only emit about 1,200 gigatons. That's it. That's all we can continue to emit from now till the next 100, 200 years. That's the amount of capability that we have, resources that we have, and keep it under 2 degrees C. Now, some scientists say that 2 degrees C is kind of the tipping point. I kind of look at it as a major transition, and we need to do everything we can to keep it under there, under that 2 degrees C increase since the Industrial Revolution. So the challenge is we have 3,200 gigatons now. We can only add another 1,200 to keep it under that 2 degrees C. But business as usual, we're going to blow right through that here very, very soon. Especially when you look at globally, we're going to increase the amount of energy by 40% And the electricity part of that, we're going to increase by 65%. So the real question is, what are the plausible pathways? What are the technologies that EPRI and others can develop to ensure that we can still have, try to keep it under 2 degrees, but still advance the technology so that we can rely on the all-important energy that we have, which is electricity. So go to the next slide. One of the things that EPRI has been doing, and it has one of the 3 major econometric energy models, MIT, DOE, and EPRI are the 3 big models that kind of look at the world and look at the US and think about what are the possible scenarios and what are the technologies that need to be developed. And so since 2005, we've done a great job at improving the efficiency of electricity, think LEDs. We've actually done a pretty good job in continuing to expand our energy portfolio, our electricity portfolio that's cleaner. Think wind and solar and certainly nuclear. And we've reduced our CO2 by 14%. Now this is economy-wide in the US. Most of that 14% is directly related to what the electric utility companies have done to reduce their emissions. Almost 100% of that 14% is what the electric utility companies have done. So one of the things, and oh, by the way, we've increased GDP by 20% since 2005. So the question that we asked about a year ago is, what if we double that? What if we double the emissions from 14% to 28% in the next 10 years? And so move to the next slide. And there are a few key important things that we need to do to achieve that. One is that we need to continue to focus on energy efficiency. Every device that we have in our homes are much more efficient. TVs, lights, HVAC systems, and so on have done an incredible job of becoming more efficient, meaning using the electricity more efficiently than what we had in the past. Continue to develop cleaner electricity, wind, solar, nuclear, and so on, and electrify our transportation fleet. And if we do that, we could reduce our total CO2 emissions economy-wide by almost a quarter, 23%, while we increase the GDP by 59%. Now, by 2030, we think that to do this, we need to have every 4 vehicles on the road out of 10 need to be electric. Now, what we're seeing is General Motors and Volvo and many other automobile manufacturers are saying we're going to go all electric by 2035. We're seeing the costs of batteries and the costs of electric vehicles have come down significantly. In fact, we're probably only a year away from a car, an electric car, having the same energy density as an internal combustion engine with a full tank of gas. That is profound. And if you don't think that's profound, just go to the Middle East and ask some of the major oil producers how profound that is. Because what we're seeing is that an electric car with fully charged battery has the same energy density, it'll go 400, 500 miles, as a tank of gas in an internal combustion engine. Now, the costs are not there, but the costs of electric vehicles are also coming down. And we're only a few years away from the cost of an electric vehicle being the same cost as an internal combustion engine. I said 5 years ago that it would be at least 10 years before that would happen. And now you're seeing it next year. That is exactly related to the continued technology innovations that's occurring not only in this area, but across the country. Profound how the impact this will have. Okay, now we're to 2030, but let's jump way on to 2050 and what do we need? So now let's go to the next slide. So to reduce emissions economy-wide by a significant amount, more than 80%, That's going to take a lot more than just efficiency, cleaner electricity, and electrifying the transportation. We need to continue to do that, but now go to the next slide. We also need to do some other things. We need to expand our zero carbon electricity. That means more nuclear, more wind, more solar, other zero carbon forms of electricity. We need to continue to think about and expand electric vehicles. Almost, it's going to have to be close to 100% by 2050, electric vehicles. There are a lot of things that we need to do. You know, we need to add many, many times more charging stations. I think in the US right now, we have something like 80,000. We're going to need to have over 3 million charging stations, and they need to be fast charging. Right now, the fast charger that Tesla has will charge roughly 30 minutes. We need to get down to 10 minutes. We also need low carbon fuels. And the leading candidate right now for low carbon fuels is hydrogen. Now, for years, I've said hydrogen is 30 years out, and so on. But the work that's going on globally, especially in Japan and Europe and the US, on using hydrogen as a low carbon fuel is incredible. Billions of dollars are going into this. Now, let me say one more thing before I wrap up about electrification. Electrification is about using electricity where it's more efficient to do so compared to fossil fuels. There are many, many examples of technology that's evolved to really improve the efficient use of electricity. And one of those is heat pumps. We now have heat pumps that can extract heat out of cold air when the outside temperature is in the single digits. It used to be, it was closer to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now it's single digits. That's just an example of how the technology has evolved to provide the ability to use electricity more efficiently. And then on top of that, the electricity that we're using is cleaner and will continue to be cleaner. And that's what will enable us to reduce our emissions way below 80% economy-wide. So go to the next slide. And this is the final one, and we'll wrap up. So how I started is that we're seeing significant transitions in the way we use electricity, how we generate electricity, and we really need to think about all of these: cleaner, affordable, certainly the environmental justice of how we generate and distribute electricity. It's got to be much more equitable, more reliable, more resilient, safer, and so on. And at the heart of that transition, EPRI is playing a very, very important role. The Knoxville office is playing an incredibly important role because what it focuses on is the delivery of electricity from the generation to the customer. It's also focused on how electricity is being used by the customer. I wish every single one of you could come to our office once we're back working and see our lab. We're doing work on energy storage, batteries. We've done some of the premier work on trying to improve density of battery storage. We've done work on and doing work on electric vehicles. We have an electric vehicle facility there. We're doing work on LED lighting. We're doing work on indoor agriculture. In the back of our office, we have a trailer, and we're growing year-round tomatoes and lettuce and so on. These are just some examples of some of the things we're doing. In addition, at the heart of our clean energy future, whether it's distributed energy resources, LED lighting, energy storage, electric vehicles, heat pumps. We're doing work on heat pumps at our facility here. It is power electronics, so that's still a critically important part of what we do. But it's an incredibly important part of what EPRI does, and I couldn't be prouder of the staff that we have in Knoxville and throughout EPRI. It is making a tremendous difference, as evident by our continued growth, and in Knoxville will continue to grow. I don't see any slowing down. So let me stop right there. we've got 30 more minutes and really look forward to your questions. So jump right in and whatever's on your mind, and I'll try to answer them.
Hey, Mike, we
Back
do
to you,
have,
Lindsay.
yeah, we have a few questions already in the chat, so we'll get started with those. One related to what you just referenced, which is the growth of what Knoxville can do as a community to encourage employment growth at EPRI locally.
So, you know, having the benefit of living in other places, and seeing, I've spent, although I've never lived in Palo Alto, I feel like I've lived there because I've been there so many times, and have, you know, we do a lot of work with the venture companies and up and down in Menlo Park and others. I mean, it's just the ecosystem there is all about getting it done and thriving and growing and using your imagination and spirit to really grow. A big interest now in Silicon Valley is energy. There's just, everybody is focused on that. Charlotte, same thing. I think what Knoxville represents to me is a significant knowledge base about energy, about electricity. It's at the core of what we do here. I mean, think about what Oak Ridge has done, UT and TVA, you know, a world leader. I think in EPRI, the community to come together and say, we're going to put a stake in the ground and we are going to demonstrate and show and brag and talk about and educate the world about the considerable expertise that we have here that is at the cusp of making a tremendous difference across the globe on how energy is going to transition to a much cleaner form of energy. It is going to happen. There is no doubt about it. And Knoxville and the region can say, hey, we're doing that. And we are going to be a leader, and we're going to attract those best scientists, those best engineers and scientists, those entrepreneurs, the capital that's required to grow. And we're going to do it in a discussion. That's what we're going to do. I think that kind of mentality, yeah, I'm not going to, shouldn't despair other communities, but there are some communities say, we're the leader. I say, yeah, right. We need to be the leader in the discussion. That's what we need to do. So hopefully that'll answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. And speaking of entrepreneurs, Tom had a question, Tom Ballard, about your effort with your Incubate Energy program.
Oh, yeah.
And are you familiar with the Techstars assessment that recently came out about the region?
Yeah, a little.
Mm-hmm.
I talked with a couple of people, but I need to get a lot more familiar with it, because our Incubate Energy, which we started, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, and now there are incubators all over the world that's involved in that, and we're helping to sponsor early stage companies, and I mean we're helping to test their technologies, but because one of the things that early stage companies have is a very difficult time connecting with the industry, the electric utility industry. We help bridge that gap. We help test the viability and provide feedback to those early stage companies about what works and what doesn't, and what you need to do to make that technology more viable and useful to the industry. And so we started that about 5 years ago and said, listen, here's a big gap we got to fill. And that's what we've been trying to do. So I would like to learn more about it, Tom, and see how I could help make a difference.
Yeah, so in follow-up to that.
Now, you can't play golf 5 days a week.
In follow-up to that, are there ways or ideas that you have, even before being very familiar with the report, where our region can better leverage the companies and the startups that are involved in that Incubate Energy program?
Yeah, well, it takes a lot. It takes capital, attract capital. There are some major venture funds now that are focused on the energy and specifically the electricity industry. One of them is Energy Impact Partners. I know them very well. A lot of utilities have invested in them. In fact, I'm involved with them right now, and was on a call with them yesterday. Energy Impact Partners. You can Google it and look at it. I said, "Hey, listen, man, I want you guys here. I want to show you what we've got." And that's one of the things on the top of my list to do. But that's just one of other venture funds. There's one out of Geneva that is getting started here in the U.S. and that, so Capital One. Second is a spirit of not only helping companies, but saying it's okay to fail. It so many times we tend to be critical of those who fail. Where in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, it's a badge of honor. I mean, if you haven't failed, you are kind of nobody. It's a weird kind of thing, but it's almost like, okay, I got to fail a few times and then I'm going to make it big. So you to help these companies come along and support them and give them the guidance and a pat on the back. Second. Third is saying, by God, we're going to get it done. We are going as a community, as a region. We are going to do this. And I don't want to hear anything else about it, but success. We're going to help these companies grow. We're going to do everything we can to make that happen. And we're going to pull together as a community, and we're going to pat each other on the back, and we're going to make it happen. I think that's the third one. And that is, don't take anything for an excuse. Just do it.
Building on that, and this is from our own Doug Lawyer, who is responsible for this. So in the power supply chain, do you think that there are certain types of companies that the Knoxville region is poised to be able to best support to help expand, relocate, that we should be focusing on?
Well, the entire value chain at one point was viewed as generation, delivery, the transmission and distribution system, and it went to the meter. But that's changed. It is now not only the generation, the delivery, but it's also how we use electricity. So the value chain has expanded significantly. And Knoxville, with the work that's going on here and the culture and the history that we have, is really able to, one of the few communities in the country that's able to really do all three. We can do generation. We've done that. Think nuclear, think small modular reactors. I mean, there's just so much going on here. Delivery, transmission, distribution. University of Tennessee has one of the top schools in electrical engineering that understands the technology. There's work going on at Oak Ridge on more efficient transmission. KUB, not KUB, but TVA has a history of testing and deploying these new technologies. The in-use side, energy storage, electric vehicles, power electronics, heat pump technology, induction heating. A lot of that was developed at Oak Ridge. So how we use electricity at the end, the consumer side, it's also very important. We have a foot in all three of those value chains that is extremely unique to this area.
And as you talk about kind of the technology and how it evolves, we've had some questions about how we're addressing, or how EPRI's help addressing the security end of that as it moves more electronic.
Yeah. So the cybersecurity facility is also part of the Knoxville facility. We have a cyber lab. We are testing various devices. Unfortunately, that is cybersecurity is something that we are not going to solve in our lifetime. We're just going to get better at trying to detect it, better at trying to recover from it when there is a breach, continue to develop the analytics, artificial intelligence, and other things to try and detect it. But it's going to be around for a long time. And it is a significant problem. As we move to what I sometimes refer to as more of a digital grid, where everything is digitized, sensors, and other things, there's a lot of opportunity to breach the integrity of a system. And we just have to stay one step ahead of it. The industry has done a phenomenal job of trying to stay one step ahead. EPRI is playing a role, but certainly Oak Ridge and UT and TVA is committed to do everything that they possibly can to prevent a breach. And sadly, it's a part of where we are right now, and we just have to work as hard as we can to stay in front of it. But I think we're doing a basically good job, but a good job is not sufficient in the future. You got to really do an excellent job, and that's where the industry is committed.
And then back to a little bit within your presentation, the carbon reduction. So you kind of looked at it from a global level and somewhat individually, but folks are asking what we can do either as a local business community or even as individuals to help contribute to that reduction.
So, at the end of the day, it's individuals. I think, I kind of look at how am I using electricity? Am I being more aware of sustainable uses? Comparing to places in India, it's, we're pretty abusive in terms of how we use the environment, but we're getting better. I think just having some self-awareness that we have to think about how we can reduce our carbon footprint and other, not just carbon, but other environmental issues like plastic. What can we do individually? And then what can we do in our community? What can we do in our businesses? We have a sustainability group at EPRI where we're looking at all of the things that we could reduce and eliminate to be more sustainable. And so I really think it comes down to individuals and then kind of build from there. It's interesting. I was talking to our son, millennial. Oh boy, is he focused on it. And us that are not millennials, if you don't think we're going to be pushed, then have an all-employee meeting like I did last year, and you see some of the faces of the millennials, and they look at you right in the eye and say, "What are you doing?" That'll wake you up. And that's not going away. No matter where you are in this world, whether you're in the middle of Africa or India or China, the focus on that is only going to get more intense.
So Mike, we've got one last question here, and if there are any others, please feel free to drop them in the chat as the answers. But just to expand a little bit more, so you've mentioned the lab and TVA and UT and the programs that they have, what they're doing, particularly at the lab. So you mentioned electric vehicles and batteries. I know they're doing a lot of research in that. How y'all work together to make sure that you're leveraging kind of those research relationships that this region offers.
So we work with pretty much all of the national labs because Oak Ridge is in our back door. We work with them, and we try, and we work with headquarters. And I spent a lot of time in DC and working with the various agencies, including the Department of Energy. And Ernie Moniz used to be who was the former Secretary of Energy, used to be on our board. I know Ernie very well. Arun Majumdar, who used to be the #2 person there. several of the folks at DOE headquarters I've known for a long time, and we have what we call technology roadmaps. In fact, you can read all of this on our website. It's EPRI.com. And we look at technology in national labs and say, here is how we see it. Here is what we see as the future. And we have these discussions and well, what are you doing? And how can we use what the basic technology that you're trying to develop, how can we use that to advance more of the applied work that we're doing? And, you know, we don't want to duplicate. We want to be additive. We want to add to what's occurring at the national labs and universities and so on. And not only just here in the US, but globally. We have work, you know, our office in Japan, our office in Ireland, and do a lot of work throughout the EU. And so our focus is applied. We want to solve problems using the technology that's out there and get it into the hands of the industry and get it in the hands of other companies that can help commercialize it as soon as possible. That's our role.
Mike, thank you so much again for taking your time this morning and for your leadership at the helm of EPRI over the past 10 years and sharing your wisdom with us. Having EPRI in Knoxville is such a strong selling point for the companies that we are talking to from both an existing business expansion standpoint and a business attraction standpoint. You know, the Chamber and our strategic plan, we have 5 platforms of the types of companies we're trying to grow in this ecosystem: communication, health, movement, security, and power. So this really helps educate all of us, because we're all salespeople for Knoxville at the end of the day.
That's right.
So thank you again for taking the time for joining us. To all the premier partners on the Zoom this morning, we thank you for your continued investment in the Chamber as we strive to drive regional economic prosperity. So I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Let us know what we can do to help.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you.